My name is Amy Eilertsen, and as part of the module Positions in Practice for Falmouth University's Master of Photography Studies, I'm presenting my past, present, and future photography work. My father was a passionate amateur photographer, and I developed a fascination for photography early in my childhood. I really cherished my box brownie that I found for $1 in a yard sale. I love the smell of the freshly opened package of unexposed film and the magic of creating an image with a strip of plastic and some mysterious chemicals. In high school, I spent my free time taking and developing photographs. I photographed objects that were readily at hand, like my siblings and dog and fields and animals. My father's experimentation with a large format view camera influenced me to do the same at a later period. While his photographs and paintings shaped what I considered desired aesthetic, his work was really typically a bit formal, dry, and honestly lifeless. I received my first book on photography when I graduated from high school. I was struck by Edward Weston's severe and direct portraits. I desired to portray the spirit in people and believed that the relaxed or straight face allowed a more accurate representation of who a person is. I worked on Star Island, a conference center in the Gulf of Maine, for several summers, and I was delighted to be able to experiment in the darkroom housed in the hotel. I learned to use a 4x5 view camera to take our weekly group photos of conference attendees. I shot a project depicting life among the hotel workers on the little island in the Atlantic. This was my first foray into portrait photography. It was difficult to ask the models to pose, as then I was quite shy. I recently opened my sketchbooks that I kept during the 1980s to find evidence of sources of inspiration for my photographs. The drawing that I made on the left was after a portrait by Lotte Jacobi, a German photographer and frequent visitor to Star Island. While she personally criticized my inability to manage a view camera, rightly so, her photos heavily influenced my sensibilities. On the right is a sketch of the boy from my favorite album by U2, which is called War. I thought these images were really cool and edgy, and I wanted to shake out that farm girl style I had developed and create what I considered fine art. Looking at these photos now, I see the blown out sky and the unimaginative poses. I think that these were a good place to start. They were in focus, reflected a formal portrait style, and recorded a specific time in my life. In the early 1990s, I moved to the Wrangell St. Elias, a large national park in the bush of Alaska. I honed my mountaineering and climbing skills and was enthralled by the wild beauty of the area. I put aside creating cool, arty photos and substituted photos to create a record of adventures. My style was informed by photos I had seen in climbing and outdoor magazines, and especially influenced by popular mountain photographer Galen Rowell. He was one of the first photographers to capture climbing, mountaineering in the mountains in a more creative way. The last 20 years of my photography centered around recording images of my children and family as they grew. I worked full-time and finished a master's in nursing, was a single mom, and I had less time for projects. In 2018, I displayed this work at a local amateur photography show, and I won a second prize. What I wished, though, was that my iPhone photo was of better quality. Knowing that I was going to take several trips this year, I decided to purchase a mirrorless full-frame camera. And while learning about my new camera, I came across the work of Mark Gaylor, an Australian photographer. I'm fascinated by his use of light and dark in his street photos, and I set out to try to approach my travel photography with more dynamism. I enjoy street photography, and I did capture interesting and spontaneous images while traveling this year. For example, I was pleased with the results of this photo, as it contains a strong sense of perspective, interesting light on the faces of the family. However, taking photographs of people while traveling leaves me with the feeling that I'm exploiting others. For example, I like trains, and I associate train stations with the excitement of going somewhere. However, these people didn't give express permission for me to take their photos. Susan Sontag in On Photography states, "To photograph people is to violate them as they never see themselves. By having knowledge of them that they can never have, it turns people into objects that can be symbolically possessed." Considering that, the street photos that I and others have posted on social media, it feels a bit like we're commoditizing experiences or showing work to prove that we've been there and done that. I wouldn't take pictures of my town and post on social media, so why would I do that to people in other countries? To illustrate the point of my discomfort of taking photos of people in the street, I created this trading card collection, which I deemed Peoples of the World Photo Exploitation Series. I've been a nurse for more than 20 years and have a strong interest in public health. I have seen within and outside the healthcare system that people are suffering. There are issues which surround us that can be fixed, but the fixes take noticing that there's an issue first. Sometimes, though, we observe issues and doing something about them may be an existential threat to ourselves. Other times we observe issues and we may not know what we're seeing, like with human trafficking. We don't know to help and we don't know how to help. Situational ambiguity plays a big role in our dismissal. Many of us have been there. We've seen a parent grabbing a child a bit too hard, a woman seeming to flinch when her boyfriend reaches for her, people stepping over a homeless person lying unresponsive on the sidewalk. Margaret Heffernan authored the term in her eponymous book, Willful Blindness, to describe why humans ignore the obvious but difficult, often at our peril. Willful blindness is not a new idea. Of this famous photograph by Margaret Bork White, Time magazine stated, "Dead men will have indeed died in vain if live men refuse to look at them." I've created posed pictures since I first used my box brownie, and I didn't become aware of the name of this method of expression until a few years ago, the tableau. I realized that I could use a posed scene to express the idea of willfully ignoring the obvious, or creating a sense of ambiguity to challenge viewers to wonder what's really going on in a photograph. Additionally, creating a posed picture involves talking the participants through the objective and the use of the photo, allowing the participants to more fully engage in informed consent. For my future work, I'm interested in researching how to create and photograph tableaux that demonstrate ambiguity and play on the notion of willful blindness. Achieving an effective tableau which demonstrates willful blindness will require a careful combination of a variety of elements. I hope to create images which viewers find interesting, engaging, maybe a little uncomfortable, and perhaps a tiny bit humorous. Elements I'll need to study include how other artists have created tableau, how to picture humor, hyperrealism, cinematic portrayal, and the use of juxtaposition to draw the viewer into the scene. My influences for this work include Charles Craft, porcelain artist and maker of disasterware, which is tableware with tragic scenes disguised among more formal elements that really create a sense of surprise and humor. Photographers David LaChapelle and Cindy Sherman, modern masters of tableau, demonstrate strong compositional elements, exaggeration, and hyperreal scenes. Director John Waters, who's known as the King of Camp, has created over-the-top and grotesque imagery in his works, such as the movie Pink Flamingos. I'm inspired by his sense of humor, absurdity, and use of saturated colors. Finally, Italian painter Caravaggio, master of chiaroscuro, which is the light and dark, creating dimensional and romantic imagery. Gregory Crewdson, cinematic tableau artist, uses more focused lighting and subtle content. I'm inspired by the widescreen and dreamlike quality of images he creates. I'd like to continue to develop my style and ability to portray, through the photographic image, the sense that there may be something not right in a photo. The above photograph, The Tower Motel, was meant to hint at the issue of abuse or human trafficking. The lighting was created using objects at hand like a flashlight and the room lamp. I did capture the image which I had imagined, however, I have the opportunity to really improve the lighting and compositional elements. Over the next year, I'm going to continue to work on creating tableau to explore concepts of willful blindness. I'll be honing my lighting, compositional, and creative skills and knowledge through this program and through my own explorations. Over the last few minutes, I have provided a summarized overview of my past, current, and future photography work. The next slide contains the references cited in this presentation. Thank you.